When my daughter stood in the doorway of the home I'd built with my own hands and screamed, "You'll either respect my husband as the man of this house or pack your bags tonight," I didn't argue. I simply smiled, walked to my bedroom, and began folding clothes into the duffel bag I'd used for construction sites for 30 years. She expected tears. She expected She expected the broken man who'd been quietly funding her entire adult life to crumble at the threat of losing his family. Instead, she got something far more dangerous. A father who'd finally learned that sometimes the only way to teach respect is to stop accepting disrespect. A week later, my phone showed 37 missed calls. That was just the beginning of what I had planned. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The smell of sawdust still clung to my work clothes when I pushed through the front door that Tuesday evening. March in Oregon meant unpredictable weather, sunshine one moment, driving rain the next. I'd spent the day supervising the final inspection on the Henderson renovation, my last project before semi-retirement from 40 years in construction management. My boots left muddy tracks on the hardwood floor I'd installed myself 15 years ago, back when Linda was still alive and this house felt like home instead of enemy territory. "Take your damn boots off, old man. You're tracking mud everywhere." Brandon's voice cut through the quiet house like a circular saw. He was sprawled across my leather couch, the one Linda had insisted we splurge on for our 30th anniversary, with his feet propped on the coffee table I'd built from reclaimed barn wood. I looked down at my boots, then at the mud trail, then at my son-in-law's pristine white sneakers resting on my table. "Evening, Brandon. Didn't realize you were home early." "I live here." He didn't look away from his phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. "Which means I don't need permission to be in my own living room." His living room, in the house I'd designed, permitted, and constructed with my own crew, the house my daughter and son-in-law had been temporarily living in for the past 4 years while they got on their feet financially. I set down my lunchbox, a battered metal thing that had survived more job sites than I could count, and bent to unlace my boots. "Hey, while you're down there," Brandon said, still not looking up, "grab me a beer from the garage fridge. One of those IPAs, not the cheap stuff." Something cold settled in my chest. I'd bought those IPAs specifically for him, spent my Social Security money on $12 six-packs, because Brandon had very particular tastes. "I just got home, Brandon. Let me get cleaned up first." Now he looked at me. His face carried that expression I'd grown to recognize over 4 years, the one that said I was being unreasonable, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. "What's the problem? The garage is right there. I'm comfortable." He gestured at his reclined position. "Besides, you could use the exercise." I was 62 years old. I'd spent the day climbing scaffolding and hauling materials. My knees ached, my back throbbed, and the last thing I needed was my 30-year-old son-in-law treating me like the help. "Brandon, I'm not your servant." His eyes narrowed. "No, you're just the guy living rent-free in his daughter's house." "My daughter's house?" "That's right." He sat up straighter, using his height advantage even while seated. "Amanda and I pay the utilities. We buy the groceries. We maintain this place. You just live here because we're generous enough to let you." The kitchen door swung open before I could respond. Amanda appeared, her red hair pulled back in a ponytail, dish towel in her hand. She took in the scene immediately, her father standing in muddy socks, her husband looking aggressive, the tension thick enough to choke on. "What's going on?" Her voice carried that warning tone I remembered from her teenage years. "Your father's being difficult again," Brandon said without taking his eyes off me. "I asked him for a simple favor, and he's acting like I demanded he walk across hot coals." Amanda looked at me with disappointment etched across her features. "Dad, what did he ask?" "To get him a beer from the garage, and that's worth fighting over." She crossed her arms. "Seriously, it's not about the beer, sweetheart. It's about basic respect." Brandon stood now, moving to stand beside Amanda in a united front. "Respect? goes both ways, Clark. You want us to respect you? Then you need to respect the fact that this is our home now. When I ask you to do something reasonable, you do it. Our home? I kept my voice level, even though my heart was hammering. I built this house, every wall, every floor, every inch of it, and you gave it to us, Amanda said quietly. Remember, when Brandon and I got married, you signed over the deed as a wedding present, said you wanted us to have security. The memory hit me like a hammer. 4 years ago, standing in my lawyer's office, signing away the house Linda and I had poured our hearts into, I told myself it was the right thing to do, that fathers were supposed to help their children build stable lives. I remember, I said softly. Brandon stepped closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet. So here's how this is going to work from now on. This is my house. Amanda is my wife. You're living here because we allow it. That means when I ask you to do something, you say, yes, sir, and you do it. No attitude, no arguments. You got that. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the little girl who used to hand me tools while I worked, who'd proudly worn my tool belt that dragged on the ground, who'd told everyone her daddy could build anything. She stared back with Brandon's same entitled expression. Dad, she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a child. Brandon's right. You need to decide right now. Either you accept that he's the man of this house and show him proper respect, or you pack your things and leave. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a cutting torch. For 4 years I'd been swallowing their disrespect. 4 years of watching Brandon treat my home like his personal kingdom. 4 years of Amanda slowly transforming into someone I barely recognized. All right, I said quietly. Brandon smirked, thinking he'd won. Good. Now about that beer. I'll pack. The smirk died on his face. Amanda's mouth fell open slightly, like she'd expected me to crumble, to apologize, to shuffle to the garage like a beaten dog. I turned toward the hallway, leaving my muddy boots and my lunchbox where they sat. Behind me, I heard Brandon's sharp intake of breath and Amanda's whispered, "Dad, wait." But I was already walking down the hallway I'd framed and drywalled myself, my footsteps steady on the oak floors. Linda and I had chosen together from a sawmill in Eugene. The duffel bag came down from the closet shelf with a soft thump. I'd bought it 30 years ago, when I first started my construction business, back when every job site required travel and long hours away from home. Now it gaped open on the bed, waiting to swallow what remained of my life in this house. I packed methodically, 3 changes of work clothes, underwear and socks, toiletries, not everything, just enough to make my point. The photo of Linda went into the side pocket, wrapped carefully in a t-shirt. My medication bottles, reading glasses, the small notebook where I tracked my expenses and projects. From the living room came urgent whispers, Amanda's voice rising occasionally above Brandon's lower tone. They were figuring out what to do, how to handle the old man's unexpected rebellion. My hands moved without conscious thought, rolling shirts and folding pants with the efficiency of someone who'd packed countless overnight bags for job sites. When I zipped the duffel closed, it felt lighter than it should have. 40 years of life reduced to 30 pounds of essentials. I wheeled my duffel down the hallway. They'd moved to the kitchen now, their whispers sharper, more urgent. I could hear dishes clattering as Amanda stress cleaned, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. Neither of them came out to say goodbye. My truck started on the first try. The old Ford F-250 had over 200,000 miles on it, but I'd maintained every system personally. It purred like the day I'd driven it off the lot. I backed out of the driveway, my driveway, the one I'd poured and finished and sealed, without looking at the house, without checking if they were watching from the window. The 20-minute drive to the Pine Ridge Motor Lodge gave me time to think. Memories came in waves as I drove through southeast Portland. Amanda's college tuition at Portland State, $47,000 over 4 years, because she'd insist on living in campus housing, even though we lived 30 minutes away. I'd picked up extra projects, worked weekends, delayed my own retirement to make it happen. Her wedding had cost $32,000. Brandon's family couldn't contribute their half, so I'd covered everything quiet. The venue at Oaks Pioneer Church, the reception at Abernethy Center, her dress from that boutique in Lake Oswego. Everything had to be perfect for my little girl's special day. Then came the house. The house I'd built with my own hands on land Linda and I had bought 20 years ago. We'd planned to retire there, maybe turn the basement into a wood shop where I could build furniture, where Linda could have her art studio. Then came the cancer, stage 4, moving fast, taking her in 9 months flat. After she died, I'd signed the house over to Amanda, told myself Linda would have wanted our daughter to have security, that fathers were supposed to sacrifice for their children. The financial support had continued like clockwork. When Brandon lost his job as a medical supply sales rep, I'd covered their mortgage. Wait, no, there was no mortgage. The house was paid off. But I'd covered their utilities, $300 a month for electricity, gas, water, internet, groceries when money got tight, which was often apparently $500 a month flowing from my Social Security check into their refrigerator. Car insurance for both vehicles, Brandon's Jeep Cherokee and Amanda's Honda Civic. $280 a month cell phone plan for all three of us. Another $150. My Social Security check was $1,400 a month. Nearly $1,100 of it had been flowing directly into their lives, leaving me with $300 for my own expenses. And I'd convinced myself it was love. The Pine Ridge Motor Lodge sat on 82nd Avenue, a long, low building with faded paint and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. The room was small but clean. A bed, a chair, a tiny desk, a bathroom with ancient tile but good water pressure. I set my duffel on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the mattress edge. The springs creaked under my weight, a sound that seemed louder in the unfamiliar silence. This wasn't the comfortable quiet of my workshop or the peaceful sounds of my own home. This was the hollow emptiness of a temporary space, a way station for people between destinations. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts, insurance companies, bank accounts, credit card services, numbers I knew by heart from 40 years of managing construction business finances. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Most offices would be open, most calls could be made. I opened my laptop on the small desk and logged into my online banking. Account balances glowed on the screen. Checking, savings, retirement accounts, numbers that represented a lifetime of 6 a.m. starts and working through lunch, of choosing generic groceries so I could pay for Amanda's wants instead of my needs. The cursor blinked. Wait, I thought about Brandon's smirk, about Amanda's ultimatum, about 4 years of swallowing disrespect in the name of family. Then I started making a list. A Wednesday morning arrived, gray and drizzling. Typical Portland spring weather. I spread my paperwork across the motel desk like a general planning a campaign. Bank statements, insurance policies, account numbers, everything organized and within reach. The first call went to State Farm Insurance. "Good morning, Miss Miller," the representative said after I navigated the phone tree. "How can I help you today? I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy. My daughter and son-in-law will need to establish their own coverage." A pause, keyboard clicking. "Sir, I show both vehicles have been on your policy for years. Are you certain you want to make this change?" "Completely certain." "May I ask the reason?" "They're no longer eligible for coverage under my policy. They'll need to contact you directly to set up their own insurance." "When would you like this change to take effect?" "Immediately. Today if possible." More clicking. "Very well, Mr. Miller. Both vehicles will be removed from your policy effective midnight tonight. You should receive written confirmation within 48 hours. The second call was to Verizon. The family cell phone plan I'd been paying for since Amanda graduated college. I need to separate my line from a family plan and remove 2 devices. The process took 15 minutes of verification and transfers, but eventually the representative confirmed, "Your line is now individual. The other 2 numbers will be disconnected at the end of the 2 billing cycle unless they establish separate accounts." "How long do they have?" 7 days, Mr. Miller. The credit cards took longer. Amanda was an authorized user on 2 of my cards, a Visa and a MasterCard. $600 I'd been paying monthly on balances I'd never created, purchases I'd never made. Mr. Miller, the Visa representative, explained, "Removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit. Any outstanding balances remain your responsibility, but they won't be able to make new charges." "I understand. Remove her immediately." Each call felt like cutting anchor lines, watching weights fall away that I'd been dragging for years. The utility companies were next. Portland General Electric, Northwest Natural Gas, the Water Bureau. Every account was in my name because I'd established them when I built the house 20 years ago. "I need to disconnect service at 4247 Southeast Woodward Street," I told each company. "May I ask why you're disconnecting, Mr. Miller?" "I no longer live there. The current occupants will need to establish service in their own names." "And when would you like service disconnected?" 30 days from today. Oregon law required 30 days notice before discontinuing utilities, but that was fine. It would give them time to understand what was coming. By noon, I'd made 11 calls, car insurance canceled, cell phones disconnected in 7 days, credit cards blocked, utilities disconnecting in 30 days. Everything I'd been providing for 4 years, all the silent support that had bled my accounts dry, ended with polite conversations and confirmation numbers. I sat back in the cheap motel chair and looked at my notes, reference numbers, effective dates, the paper trail of financial independence. If this story reminded you of the injustices you've seen, follow the channel and turn on notifications, because wherever justice is delayed, a new revenge story begins. My phone sat silent on the desk, no missed calls, no urgent messages. They didn't know yet, but they would. Soon enough, Brandon would try to drive his Jeep and discover his insurance had lapsed. Amanda would use her credit card and find it declined. Their cell phones would lose service mid-conversation, and then they'd understand that the quiet man they'd been treating like a servant had just stopped serving. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, a young couple was loading luggage into a car, laughing about something. The easy intimacy reminded me of Linda and me in our early years, before the cancer, before I'd lost my partner and been left with a daughter who'd gradually learned to see me as an ATM with legs. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. The first message arrived Thursday morning at 6:42 a.m. "Dad, there's something wrong with my phone. Can you call Verizon?" I deleted it without responding. The second message came at 8:15 a.m. "Dad, seriously, my phone's gonna get shut off. They're saying something about the account. Call me." I deleted that one too. By Thursday evening, my phone showed 7 missed calls and 4 increasingly frantic messages. Friday brought 12 more calls and a voicemail that started with Amanda's shaky voice. "Dad, I don't know what's going on, but the insurance company says our cars aren't covered anymore. Please call me back. This is serious." I listened to each voicemail once, cataloging the progression from confusion to anger to the first hints of panic. Then I deleted them systematically, the way I'd delete sawdust from a table saw after a day's work. Saturday morning, I was having coffee at the Pancake House on 82nd when Bob Patterson walked in. Bob had been my business partner for 15 years before retiring to Arizona. He was back in town visiting his grandkids. "Clark Miller." Bob's voice boomed across the restaurant. "When did you start frequenting this joint?" I waved him over to my booth. "Bob, good to see you. How's retirement treating you?" He slid into the opposite seat, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Can't complain. Though I heard through the grapevine you're staying at Pine Ridge, everything okay? Small towns might have gossip networks, but the Portland construction community was even worse. Everyone knew everyone else's business, family situation, I said carefully, needed some space. Bob nodded slowly, his expression shifting to concern. That son-in-law of yours came by the Union Hall last month, tried to get a contractor loan. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What kind of loan? Said he needed $75,000 for a major renovation project. Claimed he was a licensed contractor working on his own property. Bob's expression darkened, but when we ran his name through the licensing database, nothing came back. He's not licensed in Oregon or Washington. He tried to get a contractor loan without a license? That's right, and he used your house as collateral, said he owned it free and clear. Bob leaned forward. Clark, the application listed your address, but claimed he'd owned it for 4 years. When we dug deeper, everything came back to you, your name on the deed, your permits for the original construction, everything. The implications hit me like a load of bricks falling. Brandon hadn't just been disrespectful, he'd been planning to defraud the contractors union using my property. When exactly did this happen? 3 weeks ago, maybe a month. We rejected the application and flagged him in our system. Technically, since no money changed hands, it's not quite fraud, but it's close enough that we keep records. 3 weeks ago, before the confrontation, before the ultimatum, Brandon had been planning this while living in my house, eating my food, demanding I fetch his. Bob, did he say what the money was for? Bob glanced around the restaurant, then lowered his voice. According to his application, structural upgrades, but Tommy Garcia from Local 290 mentioned he'd seen Brandon at Chinook Winds Casino pretty regularly. Word is he's got some significant gambling debts. Gambling debts. The pieces were clicking into place like joints in a well-built frame. How significant? Tommy didn't have specifics, but enough that Brandon was getting pressure from some unpleasant people, collection types. If you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant. Loan sharks didn't file paperwork with the courts. They used more direct collection methods. Bob, I appreciate you telling me this. Clark, Bob's expression turned serious. Be careful. A man who'd try to fraudulently mortgage someone else's house might do other desperate things when he's cornered, especially if he's got gambling debts and debt collectors breathing down his neck. After Bob left, I sat in the booth processing this new information. Brandon's beer demand suddenly made perfect sense. He hadn't just been asserting dominance, he'd been testing to see how far he could push me, how completely he could control the man whose property he'd tried to steal. The ultimatum wasn't about risk, it was about maintaining access to assets he believed he could exploit. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note titled Brandon Thompson, Evidence. Bob's revelation was just the beginning. If Brandon had been lying about his contractor license and trying to steal $75,000, what else had he been hiding? I needed to document everything, build a case, because something told me this was far from over. The waitress refilled my coffee. Through the window, I watched Saturday morning traffic flow past on 82nd Avenue. Somewhere out there, Brandon and Amanda were probably just now discovering that their car insurance had actually lapsed, that it wasn't just a billing error. The panic would be setting in soon. I pulled out my laptop and started building a spreadsheet. Every dollar I'd spent on them for 4 years, every utility payment, every grocery run, every tank of gas I'd paid for. 4 years of supporting 2 adults who'd treated my generosity as entitlement. I was done being generous. Now I was going to be thorough. Tessa. Sunday morning brought the first personal visit. I was reviewing my documentation. 4 years of bank statements laid out in chronological order, highlighting every payment I'd made on their behalf. when someone knocked on my motel room door. Through the peephole I saw them both, Amanda in a wrinkled sweatshirt, makeup free, looking like she'd been crying. Brandon in his Timberland boots and North Face jacket, trying to look intimidating but mostly looking desperate. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Dad," Amanda's voice cracked. "We need to talk." "About what?" Brandon pushed forward, his face red with anger. "About the fact that you're sabotaging our lives over a stupid argument about beer." "I'm not sabotaging anything," I said calmly. "I'm simply no longer paying for your lives." "The insurance, Clark." Brandon's voice rose. "You can't just cancel our insurance without warning. That's our cars. Our transportation. Actually, those are your cars. Your transportation. Which means your insurance." I kept my voice level. "You're both adults with jobs. You can handle your own insurance and the cell phones." Amanda grabbed Brandon's arm as he tried to step closer. "Dad, our phones are going to be shut off in 4 days. How are we supposed to work without phones?" "The same way millions of adults do, by paying for your own service." Brandon's fake composure was cracking. "What about the utilities?" Portland General called saying service is being discontinued. "In 30 days, plenty of time to set up new accounts in your names." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, please, we can't afford all of this at once. The insurance alone is $400 a month for both cars." "Then you probably should have thought about that before giving me an ultimatum." "I didn't mean it like that," she said desperately. "Yes, you did." I looked at my daughter, seeing a stranger wearing her face. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to actually leave." Brandon tried a different approach, his voice artificially calm. "Look, Clark, we all said things we didn't mean, but you're talking about essentials here. Transportation, communication. You can't just pull the rug out like this." "I can, and I did. I started to close the door." "You wanted to be independent adults running your own household. Congratulations, now you can." "Dad, wait." Amanda's voice broke completely. "What about family? What about everything Mom would have wanted?" I paused, looking at her desperate face. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to bring me lemonade on hot construction days, who'd proudly shown me every drawing she'd made at school. But that little girl had grown into a woman who'd stood silently while her husband treated her father like a servant in his own home. "Your mother would have wanted you to treat me with respect, Amanda. She would have been ashamed of how you've acted these past 4 years." The words hit her like a physical blow. Brandon's face went purple with rage. "You self-righteous old bastard," he snarled. "Fine, we'll handle our own shit. But don't come crawling back when you realize how lonely life is without family." "Brandon," I met his eyes steadily. "I spent 40 years building homes for families. I know the difference between family and people who share blood. You two stopped being family the day you made me choose between my dignity and your demands." I closed the door softly but firmly. Through the thin walls I could hear Brandon's raised voice and Amanda's crying as they walked back to their car, the car they'd need to insure themselves by midnight tonight or face driving illegally. I returned to my laptop and opened a new document. The financial separation was just the first phase. Phase 2 would be even more interesting, because Bob Patterson's revelation about the fraudulent loan application had given me an idea. If Brandon had tried to steal from me once using forged documents, that was a crime, a documented crime with witnesses and evidence, and crimes had consequences. I pulled up the Oregon State Bar website and started researching real estate fraud. Then I opened my email and began drafting a message to the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office. The motel room felt smaller suddenly, but in a good way. Focused, like a workshop where every tool had its place and every project had a plan. Brandon and Amanda wanted independence. They were about to learn that independence came with responsibilities they'd never imagined, and consequences They couldn't escape. My phone buzzed with another message from Amanda. "Dad, please, we're sorry. Can we just talk about this?" I deleted it without responding. Words were easy. Words were cheap. I'd spent 4 years listening to words while watching actions that contradicted every promise they'd made. No more words, only actions now. And my actions were going to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Monday morning, I walked into the Clackamas County District Attorney's office with a manila folder containing 4 years of documented evidence. The receptionist directed me to a small conference room where Assistant DA Rachel Kim reviewed my materials with the focused intensity of someone who'd prosecuted hundreds of fraud cases. "Mr. Miller," she said after 20 minutes of silence, "this is attempted mortgage fraud. Your son-in-law tried to obtain $75,000 using property he doesn't own with a contractor's license he doesn't possess. Can you prosecute? We can investigate. The contractors union has records of the application. If we can prove he knowingly provided false information with intent to defraud, that's a Class C felony in Oregon." Rachel looked up from the documents. "But I need to ask, are you prepared for what this means? This could send him to prison for up to 5 years. I thought about Brandon's smirk, about Amanda's ultimatum, about 4 years of quiet disrespect building to that final confrontation. I'm prepared. And your daughter? This will affect her too. My daughter made her choice when she stood beside him and told me to leave. She's an adult. Adults face consequences. What would you do at this point? Write it in the comments. Your thoughts are as important as the story itself." Rachel nodded slowly. "I'll open an investigation. It'll take a few weeks to gather evidence, interview witnesses at the union, subpoena financial records. You'll need to testify about the property ownership and your relationship with the accused. Whatever's needed." By the time I left the DA's office, the formal wheels of justice were turning. Brandon Thompson was now under criminal investigation, and he had no ID. My next stop was the Multnomah County Courthouse. The clerk's office was busy with the usual Monday morning crowd, but eventually I reached a window where a tired-looking woman processed my paperwork with professional efficiency. "Eviction notice," she read aloud, scanning the documents. "For 44247 Southeast Woodward Street. Mr. Miller, I need to confirm you're the property owner." I slid the deed across the counter, my name clear as day, recorded 20 years ago, and the current occupants, my daughter and son-in-law. They've been residing there for 4 years under a verbal agreement requiring mutual respect and financial responsibility. Both conditions have been violated. She stamped the papers with practiced authority. 30-day notice period begins today. If they contest, we'll schedule a hearing. Otherwise, the sheriff will serve final eviction papers after the deadline. How long before they receive notice? Sheriff's Department handles service of process, usually within 72 hours. I collected my copies, feeling the weight of legal authority behind my action. No more emotional manipulation, no more family guilt. Everything through proper channels now. My phone had accumulated 23 missed calls by the time I returned to the motel. I listened to the voicemails in chronological order, watching the progression from confusion to desperation. Amanda, 9:15 a.m. "Dad, the electric company called. They're saying service will be shut off in 30 days. There must be some mistake." Brandon, 11:47 a.m. "Clark, we need to talk. This has gone far enough. You're being ridiculous." Amanda, 2:33 p.m. "Please, Dad, Brandon's boss is asking about his insurance. He can't drive for work without coverage. You're going to get him fired." Brandon, 4:52 p.m. "You're going to regret this, old man. You can't just destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt." The last message was from Amanda, timestamp 6:18 p.m., her voice thick with tears. "Dad, I'm pregnant. The stress from all this is making me sick. Please, for your grandchild's sake, can we work this out? Pregnant, the word hit me like a hammer strike. I was going to be a grandfather. I sat heavily on the motel bed, my phone still clutched in my hand. If Amanda was really pregnant, if there was really a baby coming, then everything became more complicated. But something in her tone seemed calculated, the timing too convenient, revealed only after every other manipulation had failed. I called Linda's sister, Patricia, who still lived in Salem. Patricia was a labor and delivery nurse with 30 years' experience. If anyone could give me straight advice, it was her. "Clark," Patricia's warm voice filled my ear. "I heard you moved out. Are you okay? Patricia, I need to ask you something. If someone's pregnancy was causing serious health problems from stress, would they know this early? Amanda says she's pregnant and the stress is making her sick." A long pause. "How far along is she?" "I don't know, she just told me today." "Clark, at very early stages before 8 weeks. Most women don't even know they're pregnant unless they're actively trying and testing early. Stress-related pregnancy complications usually don't show up until later, and they wouldn't be apparent without medical testing. So if she's claiming stress-related sickness, she's either further along than she's letting on, or she's exaggerating for effect. Either way, you should ask for medical documentation." Patricia's voice softened. "I heard what Brandon did, how they treated you. Don't let them manipulate you with a maybe baby, Clark. If Amanda's really pregnant and there's really a medical issue, her doctor will document." After hanging up, I texted Amanda, "Congratulations on the pregnancy. Please have your doctor send me documentation of any medical concerns directly. I'll help with legitimate medical expenses." Her response came within minutes. "You don't trust your own daughter? I trust medical professionals. Have Dr. Morrison's office contact me." No response after that. Tuesday morning brought Detective Sarah Chin to my motel room. She was a compact woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Miller, I'm following up on your report about attempted fraud. Can you walk me through the timeline?" I showed her everything. Bob Patterson's statement about the contractors' union application, the deed to my house, the timeline of Brandon's escalating disrespect, the gambling debts Tommy Garcia had mentioned. "Mr. Miller, I need to be honest with you. Attempted mortgage fraud is serious, but these cases are hard to prosecute unless we can prove intent and pattern of behavior." She tapped the folder. "The gambling debts help establish motive, but I need more. Has Brandon done anything else suspicious? Forged documents? Used your identity?" I thought for a moment, then pulled out my laptop. "He's been living in my house for 4 years. Let me check my credit report." 10 minutes later, we were both staring at my screen. 3 credit cards I'd never opened. 2 personal loans I'd never applied for. A total of $42,000 in debt, all opened within the past 18 months. All using my name, my social security number, and my address. Detective Chin's expression hardened. "That's identity theft. That's fraud. That's a pattern of criminal behavior." She stood up. "Miss Miller, I need you to file a formal identity theft report with the credit bureaus immediately. Then we're getting a warrant for Brandon Thompson's financial records. Will this be enough to prosecute?" "This is enough to arrest him today." By Tuesday afternoon, Brandon Thompson was sitting in a Clackamas County holding cell, charged with identity theft, fraud, and attempted mortgage fraud. Bail was set $50,000, money he didn't have because he'd gambled away everything and stolen $42,000 more. My phone rang constantly, Amanda crying and begging me to bail Brandon out. Amanda's friends calling me a heartless father, even my brother in Seattle asking if I'd lost my mind. I didn't answer any of them. Wednesday morning, the eviction notice was served. According to the sheriff's deputy who called me, Amanda had answered the door, read the papers, and collapsed, crying on the front porch. She kept saying something about being pregnant and homeless, the deputy told me. Wanted to know if there was any way to stop the eviction. She has 30 days to vacate. That's Oregon law. Just wanted to make sure you knew she's pretty upset. I appreciate you letting me know. That afternoon I drove past my house, their house, I supposed, for 27 more days. Amanda's car was in the driveway, but the Jeep was gone, probably impounded since Brandon couldn't drive without insurance and was currently in jail. The lawn needed mowing. The hedges I'd planted 15 years ago were overgrown. The flower beds Linda had designed were choked with weeds. They'd been living in my house for 4 years and couldn't even maintain the property. I drove away without stopping, heading to the office of my attorney, Donald Pierce. Donald had handled Linda's estate and knew every detail of my financial situation. "Clark, I heard about Brandon's arrest. The legal community is buzzing." Donald gestured to a chair in his cramped office. "What can I do for you?" "I need to change my will." He pulled out a legal pad. "What changes are you thinking?" "Everything currently designated for Amanda goes to the Oregon Veterans Housing Fund. The house, once she's evicted, gets donated to Habitat for Humanity. My retirement account split between the Wounded Warrior Project and the American Cancer Society in Linda's memory." Donald's pen stopped moving. "Clark, that's your entire estate. You're cutting your daughter out completely." "My daughter chose her husband over her father. She stood by while he stole my identity and ran up $42,000 in fraudulent debt. She gave me an ultimatum that forced me out of my own home." I met his eyes steadily. "I'm not cutting her out as punishment. I'm making sure my estate goes to people who actually deserve it. What if she apologizes? What if she gets her life together? Then I'll be happy for her. But my money isn't going to fund another 4 years of entitlement and disrespect." Donald drafted the documents while I waited. By Thursday afternoon, my new will was signed, witnessed, and filed. Amanda Miller would inherit nothing. Not the house she'd claimed as hers. Not the retirement accounts I'd built over 40 years. Nothing. For the first time in 4 years, I felt lighter. Subscribe and stay tuned so you don't miss any true revenge story. Sometimes, even silence is the strongest form of revenge. The Portland construction community has its own communication network, faster and more efficient than any social media platform. By Thursday evening, everyone knew about Brandon's arrest. Friday morning, I walked into Marco's diner for breakfast and found myself surrounded by old colleagues and friends. "Clerk, heard what happened," Marco himself said, sliding a free coffee across the counter. "That son-in-law of yours has been bad news for a while. Tommy Garcia told me about the gambling. Tommy knows more than I did, apparently. Tommy says Brandon owes money to some Russian guys out of Southeast. Not the kind of people who take 'I'll pay you later' as an answer." Marco leaned closer. "Word is that's why he tried the fraud thing. He was desperate." Dave Morrison, a retired plumbing contractor, stopped by my booth. "Clerk, I wanted you to know Brandon tried to use your name as a reference on a credit application 6 months ago. Called me pretending to be you, asking me to verify his income. I knew it wasn't you, so I hung up. Why didn't you tell me?" "Thought about it. But you seemed like you had enough on your plate." Dave looked genuinely apologetic. "Should have said something. Might have saved you some trouble." The stories kept coming all morning. Brandon had been running scams all over town, using my name, my reputation, my relationships. The construction community had known he was bad news, but no one wanted to be the one to tell me my son-in-law was a criminal. By the time I left Marco's, I had 7 new business cards with phone numbers of people willing to testify about Brandon's fraudulent activities. The community was rallying, not out of pity, but out of respect for a man who'd spent 40 years building things honestly. Saturday morning brought a visitor I didn't expect. I was reviewing financial documents, calculating exactly how much Brandon's identity theft had cost me, when someone knocked softly on my motel door. Through the peephole I saw Amanda, alone this time. No makeup, wearing sweatpants and one of my old construction company t-shirts. She looked like she'd been crying for days. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Dad, her voice was barely a whisper. Can we talk, please? About what? About everything. About Brandon. About the house. About... She touched her stomach. About your grandchild. Are you really pregnant? She nodded, pulling out a folded paper from her pocket. A doctor's note dated 3 days ago. 6 weeks pregnant, with a warning about elevated stress levels. So she was pregnant, and the stress was real. Come in, I said quietly. She sat in the single chair while I perched on the bed edge. We stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like miles. I didn't know, she said finally, about the identity theft, about the gambling, about any of it. You knew he was disrespectful. You knew he treated me like a servant. You chose to stand with him anyway. I loved him, Dad, I thought. She wiped her eyes. I thought that's what marriage meant, supporting your husband no matter what, even when your husband is wrong, even when he's hurting your father. She didn't answer immediately. Outside, I could hear traffic on 82nd Avenue, the distant wail of a siren, the ordinary sounds of life continuing while ours fell apart. Mom would be so disappointed in me, Amanda whispered. Yes, she would. The bluntness made her flinch. But I wasn't going to soften the truth. Linda would have been heartbroken to see what our daughter had become. I'm going to divorce him, Amanda said. Once the baby's born, once everything's settled, I'm filing papers. Good. But Dad, I don't have anywhere to go. The eviction notice says 30 days. Brandon's in jail and can't make bail. I can't afford to move and pay first month, last month, deposit. My savings are gone because... She stopped, looking ashamed. Because you spent them on what? Bailing Brandon out of smaller debts, paying off gambling losses. I didn't know how bad it was until the collection calls started. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I thought I was helping my husband. I didn't realize I was enabling a criminal. I believed her, not because I was naive, but because I knew my daughter. She'd inherited Linda's trusting nature, her belief that love could fix anything. Brandon had exploited that nature for 4 years. What do you want from me, Amanda? Honestly, I want you to tell me there's a way to fix this, that you'll let me stay in the house until the baby's born, that you'll forgive me and we can go back to being a family. I can't do that. Her face crumpled. Why not? Because you need to face consequences. Because you need to learn that actions matter. Because I spent 4 years protecting you from reality. And look where it got us. I kept my voice gentle but firm. If I bail you out now, you'll never learn. You'll never grow. You'll find another Brandon and repeat the same pattern. So you're just going to let me be homeless while pregnant? No, I'm going to let you figure out how to be an independent adult who takes responsibility for her choices. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot. Patricia has a spare room in Salem. She'll let you stay there rent-free until the baby born in exchange for help around the house. It's a safe place with family who'll support you without enabling you. Amanda stared at the screen. Aunt Patricia? I called her yesterday. She said you're welcome anytime, but there are conditions. You have to get a job. You have to contribute to household expenses. You have to attend counseling. I put my phone away. And you have to acknowledge publicly what happened. The truth. All of it. What do you mean, publicly? I mean, you write a letter explaining how you and Brandon treated me, how you realize it was wrong, how you're taking responsibility. I met her eyes. And you post it on Facebook where all our mutual friends can see it. No excuses, no blaming, just truth. Dad, that's humiliating. So was being ordered to fetch beer in my own home. So was being given an ultimatum by my own daughter. So was discovering my son-in-law had stolen my identity. She sat in silence, processing. Outside, the motel's neon sign flickered to life as evening approached. If I do this, Amanda said slowly, if I write the letter and move to Patricia's and do everything you're asking, will you be in the baby's life? The question hit harder than I expected. My grandchild, Linda's grandchild. A baby who had no control over their parents' mistakes. Yes, I said quietly, but not as a checkbook, not as a solution to every problem, as a grandfather who loves you both, but expects respect in return. I can do that. She stood up, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Dad, I really am sorry. I know words aren't enough, but I mean it. Then show me through actions. That's all I've ever asked. After she left, I sat alone in the dim motel room and let myself feel the weight of what had happened. My daughter was pregnant and divorcing a criminal. My house was being donated to charity. My family as I'd known it was gone. But maybe, just maybe, something better could grow from the ashes. My house, the house Linda and I had built together, the house I'd given away and then taken back, now served 3 military families, transitioning back to civilian life. I stood in the backyard I'd landscaped 20 years ago, watching children play on the swing set the fund had installed. Sergeant Marcus Williams, recently returned from deployment, shook my hand firmly. Mr. Miller, this opportunity means everything to my family. Thank you for your service to veterans. I just provided the house. You folks provided the service that deserves honoring. Amanda stood beside Patricia, her pregnancy now obvious at 24 weeks. She'd kept every promise, written the public apology, moved to Salem, got a job at a dental office doing administrative work, attended counseling twice a week. We'd had coffee 3 times, awkward conversations where we slowly rebuilt trust through honesty instead of manipulation. Dad, she approached me carefully. Can I show you something? She pulled out her phone and showed me an ultrasound image. It's a girl. I'm naming her Linda, if that's okay. Linda, my wife's name. My granddaughter would carry it forward. Your mother would love that. I know I can't undo the past 4 years. I know I hurt you terribly. Amanda's voice was steady, no longer the desperate pleading of 4 months ago. But I want you to know, I'm going to raise this baby differently. She's going to learn respect. She's going to understand that family isn't about using people. That's all I ever wanted to hear. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Shen. Brandon Thompson sentenced to 5 years for identity theft and fraud. Won't be eligible for parole until year 3. I showed Amanda the message. She nodded slowly. No tears, just acceptance. Good. He needs to face what he did. We stood together in the backyard, watching the veterans' children play. The house had found its purpose. My daughter was finding her way, and I'd found peace in the small lakeside cabin I'd purchased with money, no longer flowing to ungrateful dependents. Dad, Amanda said quietly, I'm going to need help when the baby comes. Not money. Just, could you be there? Could you teach her how to build things like you taught me? I remembered a little girl in a tool belt too big for her body, handing me nails and asking endless questions about carpentry. That little girl was still in there somewhere, buried under 4 years of bad choices, but fighting her way back. Yes, I said, I'll be there. The sun was setting over Portland, painting the sky orange and gold. In 4 months, my granddaughter would be born. In 4 months, I'd hold Linda's namesake and maybe, just maybe, teach her that respect wasn't demanded, it was earned. One nail at a time, one honest action at a time, one generation learning from the mistakes of the last. I'd spent 4 years being taken advantage of, 4 months teaching hard lessons, and now I had a lifetime ahead to build something better. Linda would have been proud. Thank you for watching. If this story showed you a different face of justice, like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next revenge story.